I'd like to welcome Herb Quady and Nichole Schulte from Quady North in Medford, where you have a huge winery, and you're working with Custom Crush. You also do your own. You have vineyards behind me, as you can see. This is your third year for Slow Wine, and I'd like to congratulate you for that early selection with Slow Wine. And at that, I'd just like to welcome you to the event and thank you for participating this year.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So we know a little bit about you, but I wonder if you could just briefly tell us about your business model, and the many aspects of your work.
So I'd say that the winery has basically been a it's been a relatively long-term project. It started in 2006, and it was kind of an offshoot of our family's winemaking project, where we wanted to concentrate on wines that were alternative for us. We had been making dessert wines for 30 years or so, and then I kind of wanted to get into a different part of winemaking. So my family and we had relocated here from California, and we decided to start a small winery. And I was a winemaker at another winery at the time, and so we were doing it kind of as a side project, and we grew it as much as we could, with involvement with my wife and my parents early on, and even my in-laws, who helped lay out the vineyard, and my mother-in-law, who still helps manage our vineyards. And so in 2014, sort of ready to make a change and try to go full time. And at that time, Brian and Nichole joined me, and we leased an old pear packing place in South Medford, and quit our day jobs and started Quady North and Barrel 42 Custom Winecraft. And so the Barrel 42 part, we do custom winemaking for other, mostly small clients.
I love that location. It's really historic. It's right in the middle of the Pear District. The buildings are so historic and beautiful. And the other thing that I'd like to just comment on is the stability of your relationship between the three partners. It's kind of unusual that you've had this good relationship for so long. How did you guys start together, find each other?
Well, I responded to an ad for a harvest position when Herb was the head winemaker at Rhone Vineyard, and Brian was then production manager and also running the vineyard there. And so at the time, I had a law practice, and I was working from my house, and I had just moved to Oregon, and I was looking to meet some new people, and the wine industry was something that I've always been interested in. And so I took an unpaid harvest position and worked a season, and absolutely fell in love with the processes and the procedures and the vineyards, and formed a relationship with Herb and Brian that has certainly lasted through the test of time. And we all work really well together and have good complementary skills, and genuinely like each other most of the time.
What are those complementary skills?
Well, let's see. I think Herb would call himself the instigator. He's got the vision and comes up with wonderful, creative ideas. And I think what I bring to the table is maybe implementing some of those ideas and coming up with processes and procedures to make them happen, and doing them in a way that Brian will approve of, because Brian's the sort of master financial and math person who can ground both of us in reality most of the time.
Yeah.
I just love it. so you've got a thriving business, and I think that it's been said that you've won more awards for your wines than any other winemaker in Southern Oregon. Can you speak to just overall how you've kind of perceive awards and challenges?
I think like one thing I always say is like never get too high nor too low, right? Like I think the people who you would find are the most successful in this business are often the most measured and humble. And so a score or an award should be taken as a impartial expert opinion of your work. But that is also just a snapshot in time. And so, yeah, I mean, if you can put together a very solid string, that is basically a testament that you are on the right track. But at the same time, I think I like to try to consider our position in relation to all of the great wines of the world, and to try to make sure that we maintain this sense of perspective. And so in that sense that we always have a long way to go, and we can always find improvement. And there's certainly, I always thought, like, if I could just figure out one true new thing and contribute that to the wine industry, that would be like the biggest measure of success, you know. And that it's going to take my whole life to do that, probably. So.
Well, you don't speak often, Herb, but when you do, people really tend to listen. It's been interesting to watch you work with groups. So I know that you're already contributing.
I think I tried to just sort of pick a part, and my part has kind of been like tends to be more viticulture and viticulture research. So like right now, my major commitment is on the live board of directors, which is an organization I think is pretty good. And then Nichole has been also working on research in the greater wine community, as you know, right? You know, being very active in the enological projects, especially the smoke taint research.
And I also think you have really strong talents in marketing. So, but let me kind of step back a little bit. These last 6 months have been fairly unique in all of our lives. And I know that the retail end of the wine industry has reached some difficulties. How have you sort of coped and made your way through these last 6 months?
Well, man, it has been a challenge. I mean, the old tricks, I guess, of trying to sell wine, which is going around and doing tastings and basically showing your wine to a bunch of people. It's just, you can't do that anymore.
Right.
So right away, it's like, okay, this is the way that we've been selling wine in the wine industry for as long as I know. So now what, right? But in March, I think we got an idea of what was going on relatively early, and we worked pretty hard in the month of April and May to make some adjustments. And it was really our wine club stepped up in a very big way. Our wine club, bought wine direct from us.
Right.
And we did a few things like just offered free complimentary ground delivery in Jackson, Josephine counties. Just said, doesn't matter. If you order a bottle, we're going to deliver it to you in Holland, in the Illinois Valley. Which we've almost did a couple of times. That helped a lot. And then we were lucky in that we had gotten some recent placements in like Trader Joe's in Oregon. And so like right when things started to really slow down, Trader Joe's really picked up.
That's great.
And so they've been buying a lot of wine.
That's great.
So so it's tough though. This is the season when we would be selling wine to festivals locally and to restaurants, and that is just not happening. So as we get into this season, the difference in this year over last year becomes larger as we miss those options.
Yeah.
So the second quarter of the year is not, was reasonably good compared to last year, but this third quarter, I think the third quarter is going to be the tougher one.
Well, I'm glad your direct to consumer has picked up. That's
Yeah.
an important aspect of it. And frankly, I think that's where your reputation and your awards will really come into play. So I'm glad for that.
And we've been trying to work, to keep costs reasonable. I think trying to price the wines in a way that average people can afford. At least average Oregonians who tend to, I think, pay more for their wine and booze than many others, but which we're lucky for. But that, I think, has been a big thing, is we're just going to have to make sure that we're relevant and that people can afford to keep us on.
Right. Good.
Yeah.
So what changes have you experienced over this last year or 2 years? I know some of them, and I'd love to hear how they're working out.
You want to take that one, Nichole?
Changes in the business, or?
We've gone organic.
Oh yeah, so we've been organic now at the winery for a number of years. I think this is our fourth vintage now as an organically certified winery, one of the first in Southern Oregon to achieve an organic certification on the processing side.
Yeah.
And then the vineyards have been in transition over the past few years. Herb's Estate Vineyards have been live certified for many years and have been in a transition period to fully organically certified. So excited to be able to work with fruit that comes to the winery and that's grown organically and then can be made organically, because I think a number of wineries, they say they grow organically, but then once the fruit gets to the winery, it's not handled in a manner that allows the wines to be labeled organically. So we're one of the few wineries that can do it from grape to bottle, and I'm pretty proud of that. Organic certification isn't easy. It's a lot of record keeping, and it's a lot of following rules on what you can and cannot do. And if you happen to miss one of those rules, you can risk being able to label the wine how you want to label it.
Yeah.
And so we're now having conversations about which wines we want to make organically and what the story of those wines will be and how they'll be perceived in the market. Nice. And so we're really excited to be able to offer organic products to our consumers.
Great. So which is the certification agency? Who are you using?
So in the vineyard, we're actually being certified conjunctively under Live and the Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Yep.
And in the winery, it's Oregon Tilth.
Okay, great.
So the vineyard is kind of interesting. We're part of a pilot program, which they have nicknamed sort of Live Plus, which allows you to have a concurrent certification of organic and live. So live is interesting because it takes into account other aspects of farming than organic does. So like organic is very concerned with the ground underneath that vine. Live is more concerned with your overall practices and your overall estate and your stewardship, worker, so you have some worker health and safety, worker compensation, and I guess the kind of stewardship is the term. So organic doesn't actually address any of those in their certification process.
That's right.
They're more concerned with inputs and soil tilth and the source of those inputs. So I think it's harder to be certified both, but I also think it's more meaningful. Because so that's why we were gone that way.
Okay, great. Yeah, that I know it does take a lot of work. So your vineyards are now in your third year, so you're in your final year before certification.
Exactly. Yeah, our last material was a non-organic source of an organic material, and so which would have happened in like May of 2017 or something like that. So we, we were really going glyphosate free even before 2018, but to be compliant, it basically we picked this period before the harvest, so to make it easy.
Right. So let's see. You're managing your own vineyards in-house. You're not working through Results Partners or another company. Can you tell me a little bit about how you're managing, what your vineyards are? You've got one behind me here.
Yeah. So yeah, we have. I have a business called Applegate Vineyard Management, and Applegate Vineyard Management, we manage about either fully manage or provide services for about 12 different vineyards, mostly in the Applegate Valley. Some of those vineyards are also Barrel 42 custom crush clients.
Right.
So in some cases they are big source vineyards for Quady North. In some cases they are the vineyards of some of our clients. So what that allows us to do is to have a kind of a very streamlined approach for decision making and harvest protocol and so forth. And it's and to that extent it's really valuable. And I mean, certainly if we feel like something really needs to happen, then we get to, we're able to make that happen. So you have the Mays and Evie's vineyards, which are behind you there. Those are our estate vineyards. And then up in the upper Applegate, which would be in the corner, there you go, behind you there, that we would have the Kathy Rogers Rivercrest Vineyard. That's another vineyard which we are certifying organic this year. It's a really small vineyard, but it produces a lot of the Grenache for our rosé, and some of the Counoise and then in the Missouri Flat area, there's the Lane Vineyard, an old vineyard. We make a couple of single vineyard bottlings from that, and then Steelhead Run Vineyard, which we get a lot of that fruit, and then little vineyards where the growers do a lot of the work and we come in and help. It's like the Buren Vineyard, we get Viognier and Roussanne, and Bob Finley's vineyard, which is called Ironbird, which is right next to Troon, where we grafted it all over to Grenache. So the Hodge Vineyard, which is a Primitivo vineyard, which we don't get those grapes for Quady North, but they do go to some of our clients. And so some interesting people up north that make some nice wines from it.
Nice.
So yeah, those are a few of them.
So you're really seeing a good part of the valley. A lot of the microclimates. You're working with a lot of different soil types.
And a lot of different, a lot of microclimates. Yeah, elevation. A lot of different varieties. Yep.
Yeah. That's as a consultant, that gives you exceptional experience, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting when I started at Troon. We were expanding, and part of the idea was to buy a bunch of fruit from our neighbors. So like in the first few years there, I saw a lot of different things, just like between soil types and trellis systems and varieties and how they performed. And that kind of gave me some, I think, insight going forward. And then it is really good to have the practical, like sometimes when you're in the winery and you see some issues with the fruit, it may be hard to try to connect that to what's going on. You just know it didn't perform that well. But if you can kind of see both parts of it, then you can go back and try to make real change to try to improve things. And we do that all the time. Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess this question kind of goes to both of you. How would you define your winemaking style? And how has it kind of evolved or changed over time?
I like to call it high attention, low intervention. So the wines are getting a lot of attention to see how they're evolving, but the goal would be to have the wines made in the vineyard, of course. The best wines that we make are the ones that we do the least amount to, and let the vineyard and the site speak for itself. So every once in a while we need to change the direction of a wine, but the goal would be to let the fruit speak for itself.
So does that mean that you tend not to blend a varietal from multiple estates, that you try and bottle or do work with one estate's grapes?
I think it depends. There's some really exceptional sites out there that really show off well with no blending. And so Quady North has cultivated a series of single vineyard wines that really show well, and we only make them in the most exceptional years too. And then there are some intentional blends that are made as well that have been an important part of the portfolio. But the single vineyard sites are really exceptional and really unique in that they each show off a certain aspect of a site.
Great. Yep. And
Yes.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like Syrah and we started with Syrah, Viognier, and Cabernet Franc, and by and large, like those ones do seem to be the ones that are most conducive to a single vineyard bottling, because when they're good, and they are pretty reflective, and they also usually require pretty little intervention. If the those varieties do very well here, and so those are the ones that don't need a lot of manipulation. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're acidifying or something else like that, but even but when you're working with things like Grenache and Mourvedre, for example, that is where blending really helps. And so sometimes blending Grenache and Syrah together, and Grenache and Mourvedre together, or Syrah and Mourvedre together right up front helps adjust the chemistry, so that way you don't have to make any adjustments later.
Mm-hmm.
So you get sort of natural chemistry adjustment. Mm-hmm. That's I think a good part of our technique that has been, we do that in the Pistoletta too, where we kind of blend early and they integrate well and they naturally complement each other.
That's a delicious wine.
Yeah.
Can you speak about your oak practices, your aging practices?
It depends on the wine, of course, but I think we use a variety of different aging techniques that can complement a certain wine. So some of our whites, or most of our whites, are fermented in stainless steel primarily, but then supplemented with either neutral French oak or acacia, which is a different type of wood that gives different characteristics to specifically white wines, and we like it on Viognier. We also have a type of amphora in the winery now that is it's called Coccio Pesto. That's a conglomerate of Italian marbles and tiles, and we've used that to age part of the wines that one of the wines that we're gonna showcase today. And I would say the oak program is probably primarily about 25% new in most cases and 75% neutral oak. And my personal preference is for lower percentage of new oak, so that the wines show off more of their own characteristics, and you're not tasting so much the barrel, but tasting the wine. But there are some instances where new French oak does really bring out the things that we like about wine, specifically in the Bordeaux and the Syrah and the Rhones.
I wonder, I was very excited over this last year to visit your production facility and observe your new equipment. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so we've really prided ourselves at Barrel 42 specifically of being able to provide a service that isn't really provided here in Southern Oregon. There's a lot of service providers up north and there's a lot down south, but we're kind of in a no man's zone here for people who want to do creative projects on a smaller scale. So we invested in some sparkling wine equipment that we've been using for the last few years, and been able to offer sparkling wine services now to even some of the smallest client production needs. I made a case of 20, or I made a lot of 20 cases of sparkling wine for somebody last year. So we've been able to help our clients grow their own portfolios by adding specialty products to their lines.
Yeah.
And that's really fun to be able to do that.
It was an exciting day to kind of run over when the equipment started rattling. So it was good. Thank you. So I know that your preference is to have the wines express their own characteristics, but what qualities are you trying to evoke or bring forth in those wines? Would you characterize yourself in any one way, or are you preferring just to establish a wide range?
Well, certainly I think we feel that, especially in these single vineyard, single varietal lots, I mean, we're looking for transparency, sense of place. But I think one thing that we're known for is texture. Our wines are always known to have a very, very supple texture, and kind of a sort of a richer mid palate. And I think we gain that by that minimal intervention style, where we sort of pay a lot of attention to gentle handling, and also the fermentation style, which is this whole berry small bin technique, which tends to slow down the release of tannins and tends to encourage longer chain tannins. So that's a kind of how, most when people talk about our wines, often they like, the mouthfeel quite a lot on the red wines, and on the white wines, I think the balance and the aromatics, this sort of sense of like you smell it, and sometimes you think this might, like the Viognier, you smell the Viognier, you say, well, this might be sweet. It smells so much like fruit. Then you try it, and actually it finishes nice and crisp and bright. Yeah. And that has to, that has a lot to do with acid balance, and then just preserving the wine, making sure it's just not subject to oxidation. So trying to get those really nice. So I think the white wines are nice and tight, right? And the red wines are relatively supple. So we have one of our philosophies, is like, I will not make bad wine, right? We will not make bad wine. So the idea for that is like, being minimalist is not an excuse to have a flaw, which is going to obscure, I think, the enjoyment of the wine, and so I think we, like, as Nichole mentioned, we try to be very, very tight and sort of conservative. And if there's things that we think aren't going to pass muster, they just don't make it into the bottle.
Yeah. And I think that's also a credit to your work in the vineyard, your close attention to the grape as it's growing, the vines, so that you can kind of guard against a poor production. So
I think actually it's really interesting at harvest. It's like, sort of, the more you can kind of walk the vineyard and you make observations, then you start sampling these different areas, and you bring those back and you start measuring those things, and you start talking about it all. And you say, well, let's pick from here and not here, or let's pick here and this place next week, or, and that helps a lot, I think. I mean, it's something the amount of steps and lab analysis we do in fall is quite a lot. So,
yeah.
And we really, I mean, we've, from some of our clients, like last year we went and took a new client with a new vineyard, and we ran about 6 different samples from their vineyard. And from that, we decided, no, we're going to pick from these 2 spots. And then we decided we're going to pick from these 2 spots. We're going to do a week apart. And I think that, like, gave us the best chance to make the best wine from that vineyard, instead of just taking a conveniently sized block, or starting on the north end and working to the south or something like that. So
yeah, I think you really do pay attention. It's on the schedule of the vine and the grape rather than your own.
They both have to work together. We got to get it. We got to fit in the day,
Got to
but
get
at the
it
same
in.
time, yeah.
But
So,
get it in. Yeah.
yeah.
So I wonder if this is a good time to segue into the tasting. And,
Sure.
And Herb, you're going to run that?
Yeah. So let's see here. Take this back a little bit here. There we go.
So you're presenting 2 wines to us today.
Right. So we're going to start out with the 2019 Oxblock Vineyard. So this is one of the wines off of the estate vineyard. And matter of fact, like, you can, over your right shoulder marine, that would be the Oxblock right there, in the background. So the Viognier, yeah, exactly, yeah. So the Viognier is kind of the uppermost part, and it's one of the parts of the vineyard that was planted as we planted the vineyard, I decided we wanted to plant 45 degrees off of true north, offset the vines from true north to better balance the solar radiation on both sides of the vine. So like the west sun is hotter, so you want to kind of turn the west side north a little bit. East side is cooler, so you want to try to turn the east side south. If you can do that, you should balance the two sides a little bit better. And the only issue with that is if your topography, you know, we have this rolling hill here, and in some parts of that, it was awkwardly steep. You were kind of running at a very awkward angle across the vineyard. And so we hypothesized that at one time we thought, well, maybe we'll use oxen to farm this vineyard. And so we nicknamed it the Oxblock. We looked into that, and I decided that we will not do that. We will we'll get a crawler tractor instead. And so,
but quite an appropriate notion for that location.
So it's a nickname for it, and it's the only block, I guess, in the vineyard that kind of has its own name. But it's something I guess, you know, we have been working hard on this in the vineyard and in the winery as well, because the one tendency of this block is that it can lean towards being quite phenolic. So there's a lot of sun exposure there. The skins can get pretty thick and can get relatively colored. And so we were dealing with a lot of tannin, sometimes tannin in the wine, and sometimes a little bitterness. In the vineyard, I think we worked with just improving the vigor of the vine. So we had a little bit more leaf cover, you know, working on a leafing timing. And then on the winery, I think we really improved with fermentation style, where we're fermenting a lot more of this in that acacia wood, both new and neutral. And that seems to really help sort of build up mid palate and integrate those phenolics a lot. So this has a really classic white peach note, which we see often in Viognier. And generally a sort of a floral note. This again is what we were talking about with that finish, which is all nice and crisp. So it has good acid balance and has a lovely unctuousness. So it sort of transcends into a lip smacking quality, but finishes with nice acidity. It actually really reminds you of eating fresh fruit, you know, like where something, you get that sweetness, but at the same time you have the acid tartness, and that's what makes it refreshing, right? Versus just eating candy, you know, and eat candy, it's always a little disappointing. When we eat fresh fruit, it's more of a complete experience.
Yeah, it's true.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a nicely well-balanced wine. I also like it because sometimes Viognier can run to high alcohol. You know, this was a warm year. We did run to 14%, but it doesn't taste hot. You know, we don't have that really, you know, intense alcoholic note. I think, you know, we like to try to keep the alcohols lower than this, but it's always a balance between getting the fruit ripe, and also the barrel fermentation, I think, can cause a little bit higher alcohols too. I don't usually drink before lunch, but it's perfectly good breakfast wine.
Well, I'll be drinking after lunch, so there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation.
Yeah. So we'll get the Syrah here. So this is the 2016 flagship Syrah, and this is we're just going into this release. So we actually picked these because we're likely to be more in the middle of these releases when the next guide is going to be published. So the flagship Syrah is another example of kind of block selection, really, walking those vines and finding spots in the vineyard that are prone to, that have something special. So this is all clone 174, Syrah clone 174. And Syrah clone 174 is not the most popular Syrah clones. It's one of the French Entab selections, and it was, in the notes for 174, they refer to smaller berries, more round berries, and generally more tannin. So we decided, this could be a fun one to try, and we also planted this in a part of the vineyard that is steeper and the soils are a little shallower, a little thinner. So it does tend to lower yields in this section, and because the vine is fighting harder to try to pick up water, berries are smaller, and because of the clone type, they tend to be more, sort of rounder with thicker skins. So any case, I select about 10 rows in this section, and we, throughout the course of the year, pay special attention to thinning and also leaf pulling to try to maximize the exposure and the concentration of this wine. So this is also interesting too. This is one of the wines where we have gone towards native fermentation. So we have started doing more native fermentations, especially on the Quady North estate wines. And what I've been doing is starting with about 2 buckets of fruit from the vineyard, covering them with cheesecloth, leaving them in the vineyard overnight, bringing them into the winery, crushing them, and then every 4 or 5 days or so, we try to double it. So I bring in some more fruit, and then we do that about, what do you say, Nichole, about 10 days before we actually pick the fruit. And so that when the fruit comes in, we have a real true native starter that we can then add to the lot itself. And we tend to like the kinetics. The fermentation starts a little slower. It never goes quite as fast. And it was pretty well behaved for the most part. So as I said before, what's special about this wine really is texture. It's sort of, power and finesse. It has a lot of richness and mid-palate. It clocks in over 14% alcohol, but you don't taste it. And it gives the impression of being thicker, that like there's more of it than your average wine. It sort of coats the tongue. There's a nice long finish, and the defining notes is a combination sort of, it's got definitely a little bit of, bitter chocolate, a little bit of, I always pick up this sort of a graham cracker note, and that's some of the barrel impact there, and as well as some sort of brambly notes, very, very ripe plums, things like that.
My mouth is watering.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a bummer to open this wine. I will have it with dinner tonight.
Nice. Well, thank you. And Nichole,
yeah.
You've got a third wine that you're presenting for Slow Wine.
Yeah, and we'll have to blame the lack of a tasting sample here on the current COVID situation. So apologies for that. But the third wine we wanted to talk about is what we call La Battalia. And La Battalia is the epic battle of of Bordeaux varietals. And it's traditionally made from 25% Malbec and 75% Cabernet Franc. And it's a partial whole cluster ferment, native fermentation. And it is a blend of vineyards, and that vineyard blend depends upon the vintage because we want to co-ferment the varietals together. We always kind of have to make a call based on when the Malbec and Cab Franc are ready at the same time as to which vineyards go into the blend.
Yeah.
So 2019, Battalia is scheduled to be bottled in August. It'll be about 240 cases or so. And it is a blend of Cabernet Franc from Evie's Vineyard, which is one of the Quady North estate vineyards, and Malbec from Daisy Creek Vineyard, which is in Jacksonville, and Cabernet Franc from Castellano Vineyard, which is also in the Applegate Valley. And it's always an interesting wine to make because it's one of those that we kind of let go on its own direction. It doesn't normally get any additives. It doesn't see any new oak. And so it is really one of the wines that we make in the most natural style and one of the most reflective wines of the year. So really excited about the 2019. I think it came out really, really great, and it hit the stylistic goal that we were looking for, which is more of a Loire-ish style Bordeaux blend. So it's definitely lighter in style. It's a little peppery from the Cabernet Franc, and the Malbec gives it a really nice mid-palate in texture and finish, and some of that red fruit that Malbec is so well known for. But I think the story of the wine is that it's a natural wine. The Cabernet Franc really sings and shows off well, and it's a well done blend of 3 different vineyards to come up with this pretty wine.
Okay, great. All right, thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Anything that I didn't bring out in the questions or that came out in the conversations?
Oh, I think the slow wine, slow food, slow wine movement is it's a great movement. Like I really like being part of those events. I hope that we continue to get it to grow here in the United States. We are certainly it tends to honor these unique geographical areas or varieties, or and this is certainly one of those. We have a really special spot here, and I think it's fun to see it start to sort of settle a little bit on some types of wine, on some varieties, for example, like the Rhone varieties, and it's kind of cool. I think it's going to be neat to see this area continue to develop over the next generation, and see if it can continue to gain prominence and continue to specialize more. And so we're just happy to be a part of that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your participation today and your time and the gift of your wine to all of us. We very much appreciate your good wines.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
very much.